The text there, Daniel chapter 3, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages. You are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. This is Babylon. The nation of Israel has been run over by the Babylonians, and these people were carted off to Babylon. God said it was going to be for 70 years, and lo and behold, as Daniel was one of those people carted off as a young man, years later, in fact, 69 years plus, he's reading the book of Jeremiah, the scroll. He's in Babylon, and he reads this, that 70 years of captivity have been prescribed for the nation Israel. He's in 69th year. And so he's interpreting this scripture literally. He says, wow, that means we're about to get out of here. And so he calls upon God, and God, what's next? And he goes into prayer. And Daniel, kind of like Jin in some ways, a long service, 80 years in captivity, or at least he was 80 years old, 69 plus years in captivity. But in all that time, he served God with distinction. In fact, he was elevated to leadership in that pagan nation. So again, it shows us that people of God, committed to God, can be used in an imperfect system to bring God glory. And so one of the many stories in that book of Daniel is this fiery furnace thing. And today, as far as I know, we don't have fiery furnaces. So we don't throw people in furnaces to burn them up when they don't agree with us or bow down to us. And so far, although maybe it's on the horizon, but we don't have images erected that we have to bow down to. But fathers and men, we do have we are on the precipice of totalitarian powers. Maybe not worldwide, maybe not universal, but they exist. And increasingly, they are pressuring us to conform, to bow our knees to these groups and these individuals and these philosophies that are contrary to the book of that we call the Bible. And so this text is just kind of a springboard here. I'm going to talk about three types of fathers, three types of men. You can actually say three types of churches. Those who, they capitulate or they compromise and they're not courageous. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So let me back up just a little bit in history. Some of you guys will remember this Soviet citizen, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He wrote this book in the Gulag Archipelago. He talks about captivity. And one of the things he did is that once he was released, he not only wrote this book, but he went on a speaking tour. And for a while, everybody applauded him. He was a great hero. But then he started speaking out, and he was cautioning the United States. This is way back in 1967. He's cautioning the United States that I see things starting to happen here that I experienced over there. And he said, watch out. And in this book, one of the things he talks about is a story where a deputy had just given this rousing speech in support of Joseph Stalin. And when he finished, his audience stood to its feet in a standing ovation and began clapping. And Solzhenitsyn tells this story, maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but he said the applause went on 6, 7, 8 minutes. They were done for. Their goose was cooked. They couldn't stop now until they collapsed with heart attacks. At the rear of the hall, which was crowded, some people could, of course, cheat a little bit, clap less frequently, less vigorously, not so eagerly, but then 9 minutes, 10 minutes, insanity, to the last man with make-believe enthusiasm on their faces and looking to each other with faint hope. The district leaders were going to go on and on and on, applauding until they fell over where they stood, till they were carried out of the hall on stretchers. Then, after 11 minutes, the director of the paper factory assumed a businesslike expression and sat down in his seat. Oh, a miracle took place. To a man, everyone else stopped dead and sat down. That very same night, the paper factory director was arrested. He was sentenced to 10 years on the pretext of something quite different. But after he had signed Form 206, the final document of the interrogation process, his interrogator reminded him, don't ever be the first to stop clapping. Let us, as Christian men, search our souls and ask if that speech had also included a denunciation of God, would we Christian men joined in the clapping? Or just pretend to clap? Or better, would we have sat with our hands folded and not clapped at all? Today, I'm going to challenge you and encourage you to consider when things are on the line and you are expected, fathers, heads of families, heads of households, when you are expected to capitulate or to bend your knee to tyranny, will you do it? We need people, we need men, we need fathers who will not stoop when it's time to stand strong. Another guy preceded Joseph Stalin, 1930s Nazi Germany. You can see this is a big rally, everybody giving the salute. There's one guy in there with folded arms. Now, I don't know if he was drug out later and beat up or arrested or anything, but that's what I'm talking about. Don't stoop when it's time to stand. This guy is showing, if not, at least not participation, maybe even open contempt for this groupthink, this mentality that, oh, whatever the Führer says, whatever Stalin says, whatever fill in the blank X says, I'm bound as a Christian, Romans 13, to submit to this kind of tyranny. And I want to say to you, no, you're not. And in fact, you are bound by God. He expects you to stand up when his honor, his will, and your respect, self-respect is on the line. Victor Davis Hanson said, are Americans becoming Sovietized like Solzhenitsyn warned us 40 years ago? And he thinks yes. The media pushes the government agenda. It gets harder and harder to hear alternative viewpoints where people are standing up and saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't agree with this. Ideology trumps facts. Why is it that there are actually people who say under oath in front of Congress, this lady not too long ago said, men can have babies? That's not factual. That's not possible, but it's ideology, and it's permeating our society. Number 3, there is no escape from ideological indoctrination. Pressure is brought to bear. Certainly not fiery furnaces, but you might get fired from your job. You might lose a promotion. You might lose a lot of things. You might lose your freedom. Why? Because ideology has taken over, and we no longer respect the right of people to have different viewpoints on religion, on politics, on how you operate your family, your employment. We need dads to stand up and push back. In Hitler's days, the churches were complicit. They participated in flying the swastika. They participated in turning in their neighbors who happened to be Jewish. And we see some of that today. Certainly, maybe not life and death yet, but we also see churches today participating in things that are contrary to God's word. Why? Maybe they're convinced otherwise. Maybe they're pressured. Maybe they're succumbing to something. I don't know. There's a delusion God talks about in 1 Thessalonians, that he will send a deluding influence on those who refuse to believe the truth. And so we see the church being divided all around the world. It's just in the newspaper just this past week. The Southern Baptist Convention, or the United Methodist Church, a whole bunch of groups are being divided along ideological lines, not on convictions of Scripture, but what does society say? So in his book, No Reason to Hide, Dr. Erwin Lutzer tells of his dentist friend who had to undergo an online implicit bias training seminar. You know, in a lot of circles, you are assumed biased if you have a different viewpoint. At the conclusion of this brainwashing, the dentist typed in a question. He says, I don't require my Muslim patients to say that they think it's good that I eat bacon. I don't require my atheist patients to say that they think it is good that I believe in God. I don't require LGBTQ patients to say that they think it is good that I have biblical Christian values. So why do I have to affirm a patient's LGBTQ lifestyle? I thought, these are good questions, are they not? Do people not have the right to disagree with me on their diet, their religious restrictions or convictions, or even that there is a God? Of course they have a right to disagree. But they don't have the right to compel me to affirm what they think is right. The implicit bias seminar leader responded to these questions. LGBTQ sexuality is central to their identity. It is very hurtful and can cause great distress when we don't affirm them. If they're convinced they're right, why is it necessary I have to agree? Sexuality is central to their identity. Not only did he say it hurts their feelings, but there's a veiled threat here that if we don't conform and affirm, that there might be legal repercussions. What does God say? The Lord God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We are primarily spiritual. We are not primarily fleshly. God said, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever because he is also flesh. Primarily spiritual, but we are also physical. I mentioned a little while ago that Jen Pretty went to heaven recently. What we knew of Jen was tied to her physical body, but she's alive. She's more alive now than she has ever been. She's in the presence of Jesus. She is there alive spiritually. Primarily, we were made for spiritual fellowship with God. When we sinned, we messed that up. But the LGBTQ and other groups, I'm not just picking them out, but it's just an example, they think my primary existence is sex. My primary existence is physical. And they're missing so much more that God wants to give them. The leader's response, there could be legal repercussions for those who don't provide such affirmation. Lutzer says, it's not enough for a dentist to treat all of his patients with equal respect. He is expected to give special affirmation to one group whose lifestyles run counter to his Christian convictions. Dads, push back. Tell the truth, certainly tell the truth in love, but don't stoop to this type of pressure. Legal ramifications for failing to affirm someone in their sexual confusion. What about my feelings and being forced to affirm what God calls an abomination? Don't we have feelings? Of course. Does my confidence in who I am in Jesus Christ depend on you affirming it? No. A lot of small print here, sorry. It's for the legal beagles in our audience. A Breakpoint commentary dated June 16th, just a few days ago. John Stone Street reminds us of the origins of Father's Day. December 6, 1907, a massive explosion decimated a coal mine. 362 dads immediately killed in that small town. It devastated the community, the schools, the churches, the political structure. It was upheaval. A few months later, a church recognized the loss of those men in that community and its impact. And so they held a special service, which later became Father's Day. 100 years later, America is suffering a crisis of fatherlessness. Children today, 1 out of 4, 18.5 million, are growing up without dads. 1 out of 4 kids are growing up without a dad in the home. Our society is saying that's okay. We don't need dads. But what does the Bible say? Of course, fathers are important. There are 3 times these children without dads are 3 times more likely to participate in crime, premarital sex, and drugs. Almost all the mass shooters over the previous 20 years were young men estranged from their fathers. And new fathers are frequently let off the hook of responsibility for becoming dads as welfare promises to pick up the check. We'll take care of mom and the baby, we'll feed them, we'll house them, we'll educate them, as long as you, dad, stay out of the picture. You're the problem. We'll take care of it. And too many guys are all too eager to say, okay, I'll make babies and I won't have to be responsible. Among 20-somethings considered low-skilled workers, 50% are living with their parents. The unemployed, that's up to 70%. Increasing numbers of boys are underperforming at school. By 8th grade, only 20% of boys are proficient at writing and only 24% in reading. It's not because they're stupid automatically. It's because they have given up trying. Dad's not in the home, or society says you're never going to amount to anything, or they're preoccupied with temptation and video games and whoever else, I don't know what. And they're no longer focused on achieving anything of significance. The biggest difference in daily schedules between those in jobs and those who aren't is time socializing. And that's not go down to the library and learn stuff. It's video games, pornography, screen time. Young boys without dads are being preoccupied with filling their minds and their souls with garbage. No wonder when they come out the other end as 18-year-olds, they're purposeless, they're discouraged, they're prone to suicide, they're prone to all sorts of things. The percentage of children living only with their mom has doubled since 1968. More children born to women under 30 are born into fatherless homes than at any time in American history. They're prone, as I said, to commit crimes, etc. David Gilmour says, manhood is the social barrier that society must erect against entropy, human enemies, the forces of nature, time, and weaknesses. No menace to this nation is greater than the collapse of American manhood and masculine strength. Now, I'm not sure I would go quite that far, that last sentence, that no menace is greater, but certainly this is a serious problem. Dads are AWOL and ineffective, and they're not passing on godly values to the next generation, which just tends to multiply. The American Psychological Association issues first ever guidelines for practice with men and boys, and Stephanie Pappas says traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. Violence is, of course, itself regarded as a badge of masculinity, and that's not biblical. Doesn't mean, to be a man doesn't mean I have to beat somebody up. But it's regarded as a badge of masculinity. Traditional masculinity has oppressed girls and women and limited the identity construction of all boys and men. Just being a man, you are the problem. In an article, Men Are Trash, the surprisingly philosophical story behind an internet punchline, little wonder that masculinity is now rarely seen without its adjectives toxic and fragile. It is reasonable to conclude that men are trash. In another article, proposed curricula teach the youngest children that masculinity is shameful and oppressive. What we need is biblical masculinity. The way God designed us to function will help our relationships, our marriages, our families, our communities, our churches. We need men to step up. And I'm happy to say our church is kind of unusual because we have a large number of men in this church that are very involved in service. Most churches have devolved to female-dominated leadership and attendance, and if the women don't do it, it doesn't get done. This is probably the greatest line in the last 50 years. I mean, I have to admit it. Gloria Steinem, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. I mean, that's worthy of putting on a bumper sticker, but it's not biblical. It's worldly, it's not helpful, it's destructive. But it's prominent and maybe even dominant. But what does God say? Let the first thing that God says on the very first day they are created, let us make man in our image and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. I know there are people today who put animals and everything up on the same level as humans. Not biblical. We were made to have dominion. That doesn't mean to destroy. It means to have dominion, to expand the garden, to make things better. God expected Adam to have the character to sustain it, but he abdicated to Eve because of self-indulgence. What is going on today with young men? Self-indulgence. Instead of thinking what's best for humanity, what's best for my community, what's best for my family, what's best for my church, we have adopted the idea, what's best for me? Self-gratification. Senator Josh Hawley said God expected Adam to have that character, and then God intends man's leadership to bring life, to expand the garden, and to create. So let's look at three fathers in this book of Genesis. We've talked about them already, but not quite in this context. And I'm going to use three descriptors. They could be used for men in general. They could be used for churches. But today on Father's Day, I'm going to be focusing on their use as examples of fathers. So the first one is in your notes. Lot is a complicit father, and what I mean by that is participating in the culture without standing against it. We know the story. If you want to turn there to Genesis chapter 13, here's Lot. He wasn't even supposed to be along for the ride, in my opinion. Abraham was supposed to separate himself from his family and go to a land that God was calling him to, the promised land, we know that as. But he took his nephew with him. Abraham didn't have children, and perhaps he thought, I need this guy to help me tend the flocks or something. But Lot went with him, and Lot was a pain in the neck for the rest of his life. And in chapter 13, verses 8 to 13, Abraham said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen. God was blessing both of these guys, Abraham and Lot, with flocks and abundance, and the land just couldn't sustain it. So this Abraham, who was given this land by God, agreed, hey, let's not have this strife. Lot, you just decide, you take the land you want, and I'll take whatever's left. And what did Lot do? Self-indulgence, self-gratification. Verse 10, Lot lifts up his eyes and saw the valley of the Jordan, that it was well-watered everywhere, and this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, you go to Zoar. So he's looking and say, boy, what's best for me? Not recognizing what's best for my uncle Abraham, not recognizing that God actually gave all this land to him. No, what's best for me? And he's looking, and he's seeing this lush river valley. Oh, I'll take that, Uncle Abe. And Abraham says, okay. So he's self-indulgent. What's best for me? He's also in chapter 19. This is where we get the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The first 9 verses. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed. And as the story goes on, we know he encourages them to come to his house to show hospitality to them. And then the homosexual community recognizes, oh, there's some new guys here in town. And they want to meet them and greet them and do other stuff with them. And Lot recognizes, wait, this isn't right. So Lot recognizes that the culture is not godly or biblical, but he doesn't stand against it. He says, verse 7, "Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have 2 daughters who have not had relations with man. Please let me bring them out to you and do to them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under my shelter of my roof." But they said, "Stand aside." Furthermore, they said, "This one came in as an alien," Lot, "and already he is acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them." So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break down the door. Lot knew what they were doing, and what they intended to do was wicked, and it was wrong. And to defuse the situation, he didn't offer himself. Hey, protect my guests. I'll offer myself to these guys. No, take my daughters. Again, always looking out for himself, stooping to pressure, compromising with a culture that is anti his values. And he's trying to say, I'm in a tough situation here. I didn't see this coming, but let me do something desperate. Here, take my virgin daughters and do whatever you want. What kind of a father would do that? Well, a complicit father, participating in an evil culture and not doing anything of significance to resist it. One more example, same chapter, verse 12. Then the men said to Lot, "Whom else have you here?" These are the angels saying this. "A son-in-law, and your sons and your daughters and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of this place, for we are about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, because this outcry has come before the Lord, this great outcry." And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, verse 14, who were to marry his daughters, and said, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy it." But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Fathers, if you compromise with the culture, and then suddenly, maybe with a pinch of conscience, you want to influence your children or your neighbors to say, we shouldn't participate in this, they're not going to take you serious. These guys knew Lot for years. They're getting ready to marry his daughters, who just got offered to a gang. And what are they saying? He's saying, "Get out of here. God's going to judge it." And they said, "He's kidding. The old man's kidding. Can't take him serious. He must be joking." They must not have ever heard about this from Lot before, about God and judgment and holiness. Here's some recent examples. Again, I don't want to take a cheap shot at anybody. I don't know the whole story, but self-indulgence. You're making $400 million to throw a baseball around for 10 years. That might impact what you think is right and wrong. June is Gay Pride Month, and the Los Angeles Dodgers, which baffles me, they draw 3 million people a year. A huge percentage of that are Catholic Hispanics. And what did they do? They invited a homosexual group that mocks the Virgin Mary, that mocks the scriptures, that mocks the crucifix and the Eucharist, deliberately mocking Christianity. If that happened to any other group, it would be headlines all over the place and it'd be nothing, but it's okay with Christians. Major League Baseball has 950 players. Just a handful of them spoke up. Clayton Kershaw, one of them, and Trevor Williams. Again, not real strong, but they did speak out. Clayton Kershaw said, well, at least give us a Christian day. Well, okay, at least he said something. Trevor Williams, being a Catholic himself, was much more adamant. This is an offense to me, and I'm not going to participate. And so some of the teams backed off, but not Los Angeles, not San Francisco, and not New York City. Those teams held fast. Here's another example, self-indulgence. These guys are making big bucks to throw a basketball around and put it in a hoop. The NBA caved. They were the first ones to cave in on the COVID thing, but later they mandated vaccinations. It wasn't to every player, but it was through the cities, and some of the cities got a pass. 450 players in the NBA. These guys are the only ones that I know of that said, no, I'm not going to get shot. Not that they don't believe in vaccinations. They don't believe in forcing people to get an experimental vaccination. I salute these guys for standing up against, maybe you're putting at risk your $400 million contract, and maybe everybody else in the league are saying, what's the big deal? But at least there's some men who will stand up and say, I'm not going to participate with this, and it's wrong. And I say we need some more people like that in other fields. Here's the second one. Second example, another one that wasn't very strong. And Isaac, who is complacent, chapter 26. And we'll scoot ahead here. I've been kind of critical of Isaac. I think he did some neat things, but as we've been studying, he wasn't a very good dad. His family was dysfunctional. His wife participated with one of the twin sons to deceive Isaac, and I don't think that was the first time. There was a track record here, and Isaac was asleep at the switch all too often. Verse 6, chapter 26. So Isaac lived in Gerar. There's a famine in the land. God tells Isaac, don't go down to Egypt. You stay here in the promised land, and I'll take care of you. To his credit, he was the only patriarch that never fled to Egypt. He's the only patriarch that just had one wife. So he had some things going for him. But verse 7, when the men of the place asked about his wife, what did he do? Self-indulgent, look out for number one. He did the same lie as his dad, Abraham. My wife, he said, she is my sister. For he was afraid to say my wife, thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. And it came about when he had been there a long time, and Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, certainly she is your wife. How then did you say she is my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I said, lest I die on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Lot offered his daughters. Isaac offers his wife. Now, maybe not quite in the same context, but it's like, oh, I don't want to get killed. So looking out for myself, I'm going to offer my wife, and I'll just say she's my sister. Not only did he put her at risk, he put Abimelech's kingdom at risk, because if he would have taken Rebekah into his harem, God would have sliced his head off or something. So, dads, when you capitulate, when you stoop, you're putting other people at risk. Our job is to protect our wife and our kids and our grandkids. Our jobs, our responsibility, we are designed to protect and to provide. And what are these guys doing? They're disagreeing with the culture, but they're not opposing it. Look what he does next, chapter 26, verses 18 to 22. Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham. Now here again, this land was promised to Abraham. Abraham dies in chapter 25, so the inheritance comes to Isaac. Now, he is the patriarch of the Abrahamic covenant and this promised land. Those wells belong to him. And what does he do? And instead of insisting, hey, these belong to me, and I'm going to trust God to protect me, what's he do? He leaves. Verse 19, when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well flowing with water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with the herdsmen of Isaac, saying, the water is ours. So he named the well Esek, and because they contended with him, and he dug another well, and they quarreled over that too. Here's another example for us fathers. You compromise a little bit here, and then a little bit there, and next thing, that's what you do. You're known as a compromiser. And bullies will take advantage of you. Stand up at the first sign of problems, and it'll go a lot better than caving in and having to deal with it eventually anyway. One more example from Isaac, chapter 27. This section is speaking of the dysfunction within his own family. There's deception going on. There's favoritism. It's a long section. I don't want to bore you with the details. Some of you are familiar with them anyway. The twins are born. Jacob, the youngest, is predicted by God even before he's born. Rebecca's having a problem pregnancy. There's difficulty, and she's saying, why is this, there's such a struggle going on in my womb? And God says, well, these guys are going to hate each other for the rest of their lives, and there's two nations in your womb, and the younger one, Jacob, will dominate the older one. Typically in this culture, the firstborn son is the leader. He gets the majority of the inheritance. That would be Esau. Esau doesn't do it. God sovereignly selected the younger son. But the rest of their lives, there's drama, there's intrigue. Jacob is deceiving his father, tricking his brother, all the while trying to accomplish what God has already declared. It's stupid. Just let God's will be done, and there would have been a heck of a lot less trouble. And then not only are the boys at each other's throat, once Esau realizes he was deceived, he said, as soon as the old man's dead, I'm going to kill my brother. Rebekah intervenes, sends Jacob off to a faraway land, to her old country, to find a wife. And this son that she favored, she never saw again. She died before he ever came back. Esau was favored by his dad. Esau's a man's man, and Isaac loved the way that Esau prepared the games that he caught and shot and brought home. He's my boy. And that favoritism and that dysfunction tore apart the family. As a father, he should have seen the culture that was in his own family. He should have recognized what's going on here, the hatred, the drama, the deception, and he should have addressed it. But oh no, it's easier to ignore a problem than to fix it. And dads, we're tempted right now, I'm sure. The society, the culture is going this way, and we are going this way, and we say, oh, it's gone too far, there's nothing I can do about it. Poppycock. Stand up, push back, tell the truth in love, pray like crazy, and do the right thing. If it doesn't change the direction of the world, so be it. But at least you're being faithful to your family and to your God. Last thing, Abraham. Again, he didn't walk on water. He wasn't perfect. He lied about his wife too. But Abraham, I want to use as an example here as a courageous man in a lot of ways. Someone who says what needs to be said and does what needs to be done, and then let the chips fall where they may. You know, dads, you don't have to change the world. You have to be faithful. Do the right thing, and if it blows up in your face, so be it. When you see God face to face, he will say, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into my fellowship. 3 things about Abraham. Back to chapter 13. You're already familiar with this story. We just relayed it to you about there's not enough room here for all of us. The land won't sustain it. So Lot, take what you need. Let me know where you're going to go, and I'll go the other direction. I use this as an example. That's courageous For one thing, Abraham received the promise, this is his land. And Lot took the lush, beautiful, fertile valley, and it took courage for Abraham to go out the other direction. But he trusted God, and I'm using him as an example here. He saw the problem, the tension between his flocks and Lot's flocks, and he addressed the problem. He suggested a solution, and then he was courageous enough to follow through with it. Chapter 14, verses 8 to 16. The king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah and the king of Admah. This is another example. Lot, you've been a pain in the neck. You shouldn't even have been there. And now he's living in Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, he's still got his field, his flocks out in the fields. He's got servants and attendants. He's a wealthy guy. So he moved into town, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah is taken over by other kings who, Sodom and Gomorrah rebelled and quit paying taxes. So the kings come in here in chapter 14, and they capture Sodom and Gomorrah and destroy it. And what happens? They carry Lot off. They kidnap him. What does courageous Abraham do? They took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food supply and departed. Verse 12, and they also took Lot, Abram's nephew, and his possessions and departed, for he was living in Sodom. Then a fugitive came and told Abram the Hebrew, now he was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were allies with Abram. And check it out, verse 14, and when Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he led his trained men, born in his house, 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Courageous. He had prepared a militia, 318 men, for just such a purpose. Hope I never have to use them, but I'm going to arm, train, and practice my militia just in case. He gets word that this pain in the neck Lot has been kidnapped and taken captive by these kings. And what does he do? He doesn't say, oh, good, I'm finally rid of that guy. No. He gets his militia, goes in pursuit, and kicks their butt and takes Lot back. Now, Lot continued to be a pain in the butt, but Abraham was courageous. Now, am I suggesting, dads, that you raise a militia? No. You could be a part of one. And I do believe there are times when violence is called for. I know it's popular these days to put everything in a basket, all of our foreign advancements, it's justified war. I think most of that is a crock. But there are times, dads, if your child is kidnapped, or your child is put at risk, or your wife is being threatened, you have the right, in fact, you have the responsibility and the obligation to defend them. Go in pursuit of them, take them back. And that's not only just from some crackpot wacko that comes in your door at midnight. I believe it's also from the state. If the state kidnaps your kids, take them back. Prevent them from taking their kids in the first place. In fact, I think on the back of your outline here, there's an example of that very thing potentially happening here in California. If you don't affirm the sexuality of your children, the state can take them and put them in a home somewhere without your knowledge. Now, it's not law yet, but they're working on it. Dads, what are you going to do about it? Oh, well, I got to submit to the government. Romans 13. I'd rather be like courageous Abraham here. I'm going to round up my boys, and we're going to go get my kid back. Last one. Chapter 18, verse 16. Then the men rose up from there, and they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them. These are these men again. They were angels. They're coming, and they're talking about, I think it's the pre-incarnate Christ. He's walking here, and they're talking about destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. And what does a courageous dad do? He says the things that need to be said, and he does the things that need to be done. And what is Abraham doing here? After Lot took the best part of the land, after Lot put everybody at risk in his own family, and Abraham had to go with his militia and grab Lot and bring him back, even after all that, God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And what does Abraham do? He intercedes on behalf of Lot. In this section here, oh God, if there's just 50 people there that are righteous, and will you spare the city? And God says, sure. 10, yeah. Well, we know the story. He didn't spare the city, because why? There weren't 10 righteous people in the whole city. But this courageous dad, at risk of himself, he says, oh, may the Lord not be angry, verse 32, and I shall speak only this one more time. Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 10. And as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his place. This courageous guy is calling upon God, talking to him face to face. And he said, oh, Lord, please don't hold this against me. But what if there's just 10 people there? And what is he thinking? He's praying for Lot and his family, that God would spare them from judgment. Courageous people don't just get their militia together. Courageous people intercede and pray earnestly for their stray loved ones, or their family members at risk, or their churches, their communities, their country. We should be courageous dads calling on God. Please reverse this mess without bringing judgment. We are in the middle of a if you, not just if you read the internet, I mean, I hope you know not everything on there is true. If you read this, Revelation chapter 13 says there's coming world government. There's a coming world religion. There's a coming world economy. They're all there in chapter 13, and it's not a good thing. I like being able to shop on the internet and buy stuff from around the world. I think we should be able to sell things to other nations. I'm all for that. But I don't want a one world economy, because some bad guy is going to be in control of that. I don't want one world religion, because some bad guy is going to be in control of that. And in fact, in that chapter, the false prophet tells everybody, bow down and worship this image, or else. You say, well, you're a conspiracy nut. I guess so, but it's right here in the scriptures, and it's going to happen. Just like Daniel interpreted the book of Jeremiah, literally. Wow, we're at the end of the 70 years. It's time to go home. I interpret Revelation literally. There's going to be a false prophet. There's going to be a beast, a false leader or world leader that we call the Antichrist. He might be on the horizon. He might be 100 years away. I don't know, but he is coming. And it's going to take courageous Christian dads and other courageous fathers to withstand this onslaught of tyranny. It's coming. Just quick things here on men in this department of saying what needs to be said. 1 Timothy 4:12, let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity. Show yourself an example of those who believe. Matthew 12, the good man brings out of his good treasure what is good. The evil man brings out of his evil treasure what is evil. But I tell you, every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment. Men, in your courage, tell the truth, but tell it in love. Don't curse your fellow man who is made in the image of God. Ephesians 4, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification. And there must be no filthiness and silly talk or coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather giving of thanks. First Thess, for this is the will of God, your sanctification. So not only saying the right thing, doing the right thing. And doing the right thing sometimes means not doing the wrong thing, right? So abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification, honor, not in lustful passion like the Gentiles. 1 Corinthians, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men. Quit acting like wimps. Quit saying, oh, well, God said the world's going to end, so I'm not going to resist it. I'm just along for the ride. Stop that. Not just avoiding participation, but being a force for good, resisting evil. Resisting evil. We don't go around bullies. We don't go around bullying people. We don't pursue violence for the sake of violence. We're supposed to be warriors, but we're tender, gentle with our wives and our children. Ephesians chapter 6, I think it is, don't exasperate your children, dads. Don't exasperate them. Lead them and guide them and love them. I wish I knew that guy. Ask yourself, am I being complicit? We all are, probably to some degree, somewhere. Let's address it. Ask yourself, am I being complacent, disagreeing with the culture, but not actively opposing it? Am I being courageous, willing to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, and letting the chips fall where they may? You know those guys in the fiery furnace? You are commanded, Nebuchadnezzar's people said, to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a fiery furnace. And they said, okay, you three guys, you're not bowing down. You better think about this. And what did they say? We do not need to give you an answer concerning the matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he doesn't, you know, there's a lot of good people serving God with sincere hearts that die, that are killed in the service of the Most High God. So these guys are saying, you're nothing compared to my God. He can deliver us. But even if he doesn't, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Boom! That's a microphone dropping moment right there. You threaten us with fire, can't touch us if God doesn't want it to. And if he does want us to burn up, that's okay, but we're not bowing our knee to you. Man, we need some guys like that today. Hebrews 11, what more shall we say, for time will fail me if I tell you of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, David, Samuel, all the prophets who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions. That's another story from Daniel. That's about Daniel. Hey, you better do, we caught you praying. We better do what we told you to do, or we're going to throw you in the lion's den. Daniel says, go ahead. And God shut the mouths of the lions. Quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. From weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight. And others were tortured, and others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonment. Wait a minute. This is in the chapter of faithful Christians. And some faithful Christians were eaten by animals and sawn in two. Tradition has it the prophet Isaiah was stuffed in a hollow log, and they sawed him in two while he was alive. Isaiah, man, the number one, the big prophet here, Isaiah, was cut in half. Wasn't he faithful? Was he being punished? Oh, no, he was doing the right thing. But an evil world killed him. They were tempted. They were put to death with a sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, men of whom the world was not worthy. And all of these having gained approval through their faith. Do you want approval of the world? Oh, well, I bowed my knee and I did what I was compelled to do, and I was complicit in all that you expected. Or do you want the satisfaction of knowing you served God and you're going to see him someday and he's going to say, good job, good job. Don't stoop when it's standing time. Well, let's close